On March 2020, a mysterious case unfolded in the midst of a world already consumed by a global pandemic. It started innocently enough. Gretchen, a 51-year-old woman, and her 33-year-old husband, David Anthony, seemed to be like any other couple trying to get by. But things quickly spiraled into a web of lies, suspicion, and deceit, leading investigators down a dark path of twists and turns. At the heart of this tangled tale was the sudden disappearance of Gretchen. The sequence of events that led to her vanishing began when she fell seriously ill. It was the 21st of March, and Gretchen, already facing the strain of a crumbling marriage, told her friends and family she wasn't feeling well. She sought medical treatment, and eventually, the news came that she tested positive for COVID-19. Her condition worsened quickly, and she was transferred to a specialized CDC facility in Belle Glade, Florida. Then, nothing. No updates, no calls, no texts. For days, Gretchen's family heard nothing. They grew frantic, and after several unsuccessful attempts to locate her, they called the police. The investigation took a strange turn when authorities learned about David's travel plans. The man, who had left Florida and started a road trip to California, might just hold the key to understanding where Gretchen had gone. But when they tracked him down, the scene that unfolded was anything but ordinary. David, completely unaware of the suspicions surrounding him, was pulled over by police in New Mexico. Officers quickly surrounded his vehicle, and David was detained. He appeared confused and bewildered as he was cuffed, but there was a chilling sense of calm in his responses. Last I heard, she was at a CDC facility. David told authorities, still maintaining the story that his wife had been sick. But when pressed for details, he could offer nothing more than the same. Gretchen was in Florida, ill with the virus, and he hadn't heard from her since the 21st of March phone call. But something didn't sit right. David's tone was strangely detached, and as the police questioned him, inconsistencies began to surface. David and Gretchen had been facing marital issues for months. In fact, the couple had recently separated, and court documents revealed that Gretchen had filed for divorce exactly a month prior to her disappearance. Yet, David painted a picture of a loving wife and a seemingly amicable split. "We didn't get along, but I still love her," he said, the words hanging in the air like a faint whisper of a past relationship. As investigators scoured David's car and found no sign of Gretchen, they grew increasingly suspicious. Was she really with him? Or had something far more sinister occurred? David continued to insist that he didn't know where she was. But then he dropped a bombshell that sent chills down the spines of the investigators. According to David, Gretchen had said something strange during their last conversation. She'd mentioned that she was in trouble, words that now seemed far more ominous than he had realized at the time. Meanwhile, back in Florida, Gretchen's friends and family were growing increasingly desperate. Messages from her had been strange, cryptic, and erratic. She told her daughter, Ava, to limit her phone use and even mentioned being in and out of consciousness. Despite being told she needed a ventilator, Gretchen was still somehow sending messages. How could this be? Was someone else sending the texts, or had Gretchen been in on the ruse all along? The mystery deepened when Gretchen's ex-husband, Jeff, got wind of the situation. He, too, began to question the narrative. As a physician, Jeff knew that there was no such thing as a CDC facility that treated COVID patients, and he knew that patients were never transported off-site for such care. His suspicions grew, and it became clear. The story didn't add up. Gretchen's family, friends, and even her ex-husband began to see the cracks in the story. The strange, inconsistent messages, the lack of direct communication, the discrepancies in David's account. It was clear that something wasn't right, and as investigators worked tirelessly to untangle the truth, one thing was certain: Gretchen's disappearance was far from what it seemed. And just when you think it couldn't get any more twisted, the investigation took another shocking turn, and it all came down to one person: Gretchen herself. But what exactly had happened to her? And why did she choose to disappear? That's a story for another time, and one that will leave you questioning just how far people will go to escape their own lives. Stay tuned, because this case isn't over yet, and the truth is more shocking than anyone could have imagined. It was a case shrouded in mystery, with each new revelation feeling more like a puzzle piece falling into place, a puzzle that no one could have anticipated would be this twisted. In the spring of 2020, The world was already on edge due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but the story of Gretchen and her disappearance would send chills through every corner of her small Florida neighborhood. By now, investigators were growing suspicious. It wasn't just the strange disappearance of Gretchen, or the cryptic, conflicting messages she sent before she went dark. It was the growing list of anomalies, things that didn't quite fit into the picture David, her estranged husband, was painting. Despite his insistence that Gretchen had simply gone into hiding due to fears for her safety, there were too many red flags to ignore. Let's break it down. Gretchen had been under immense pressure recently, between her crumbling marriage and personal struggles. She had filed for divorce, and those close to her knew that she was facing a lot of challenges. But what David was saying about her being in hiding, terrified of whistleblower retaliation, sounded more like a last-ditch attempt to cover up the truth. The question was, what was really happening behind the scenes? Things began to take a much darker turn when the police turned their attention to Gretchen's property. They started by conducting a welfare check, and what they found raised alarms immediately. The garage was a scene of unusual disarray, a fallen picture frame, shattered glass. But the physical evidence didn't tell the whole story. No, the key to unlocking this mystery wasn't going to be found in the broken objects scattered across the floor. It was found in the digital world. Authorities discovered that Gretchen had turned off her phone's location tracker. This wasn't just a precautionary move. Gretchen was an active user of the Life 360 app, a tool that let her family and friends know where she was at all times. The fact that her location was now entirely cut off made it seem as though she had vanished without a trace. But why? And was she really the one behind the texts her family had received in those final days? To answer those questions, police started knocking on doors in Gretchen's neighborhood, and that's when they caught their first real break, a neighbor who noticed something odd. A strange white stain in the driveway. This wasn't something anyone would typically think twice about, but given the situation, it was enough to send chills down their spines. And the clues didn't stop there. Gretchen's neighbor, Chrissy, reported smelling bleach coming from the house in the days before Gretchen disappeared. Bleach, an odor often associated with cleaning, but also, as investigators would soon realize, a smell that could indicate something far more sinister. And then, the bombshell. David, now under increasing pressure from detectives, dropped a statement that shocked everyone. Over the phone with a Florida detective, he said that in addition to her ongoing health struggles, Gretchen had uncovered something even darker: illegal federal tax fraud. Gretchen had apparently been working as a whistleblower, preparing a case with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, and the Office of Special Counsel. David's claim that she was hiding, terrified for her life, suddenly felt like it was more than just a flimsy excuse. But despite David's attempts to frame the situation as a woman on the run, the evidence suggested something much more sinister. Gretchen might not have just gone into hiding. She could have been silenced. But who would do such a thing, and why? As the investigation ramped up, David's whereabouts became a key focus. After 3 long days of searching, the authorities finally caught a break. David was spotted in a gas station in Las Cruces, New Mexico, alone with his husky Kobe and without his truck. They moved quickly, arresting him on the spot. Only this time, there would be no avoiding the truth. The detective who had spoken to David over the phone was now face to face with him, delivering the crushing news. David Anthony was under arrest for murder. David, stunned, continued to insist that he had no idea where Gretchen was, but the detectives weren't ready to reveal all of their findings just yet. The real bombshell came when they revealed that a neighbor had overheard something horrifying: a woman's screams in the early hours of that Saturday morning. "It hurts. Stop it." The chilling screams echoed in the neighborhood for several minutes, yet no one called the police. A single moment of hesitation had just turned the case from a missing person to something much more sinister. And as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, investigators uncovered a startling detail. Another neighbor's security camera had captured strange activity in the early morning hours of that Saturday, very day Gretchen went missing. What was once just an ordinary neighborhood had now become the stage for a crime no one could have predicted. So now, the pieces were starting to come together. The stains in the driveway, the bleach smell, the disturbing screams, David's bizarre phone calls. Everything pointed toward one thing: Gretchen might not just be missing, she might be dead. And David knew exactly what happened. But with so many unanswered questions, who was behind the tax fraud? Who was Gretchen really hiding from? And what had actually happened on that fateful Saturday morning? The investigation was far from over. And as we continue to peel back the layers of this case, one thing is certain. The truth is far darker and more complex than anyone could have imagined. Stay tuned, this story is just getting started, and it's about to take an even more shocking turn. The case of Gretchen's disappearance has taken an eerie turn, and it's clear that everything surrounding her vanishing has more layers than initially believed. The authorities were already looking at her troubled marriage with David, and it seemed that the pressure she was under in her personal life could have been a breaking point for her. But things quickly began to take a darker turn as investigators began uncovering more. David's strange behavior raised more red flags than anyone could have anticipated. His truck, seen parked outside Gretchen's house the morning she went missing, was a key detail that couldn't be ignored. Witnesses reported a black pickup truck near Gretchen's home that morning, trying to hitch a boat trailer before speeding off. The truck in question matched the description of David's vehicle. This connection made David one of the last people seen near Gretchen before she vanished, adding more suspicion to the case. But David wasn't making things easier for the investigators. When confronted about the truck's presence, he seemed to dodge the question. Instead, he hinted at something much darker, suggesting there was more going on, something deeper than just a missing person case. "This is like dealing with deep pockets," David said. "There's a lot more to this than just, deep pockets." This cryptic statement only deepened the mystery. As authorities dug deeper, they uncovered Gretchen's unsettling phone records. Her phone had been pinging in Gulf Breeze, Florida, far from where she was supposedly going for medical treatment. David claimed that he and Gretchen had been driving separate vehicles, and he implied she might have bolted on her own. But the reality didn't match up with his story. Gretchen's phone was off the grid, yet it seemed to be in a completely different location. David's refusal to tell the truth about Gretchen's whereabouts only added fuel to the fire. Then, a shocking discovery came when Gretchen's family went to the hospital in search of her. Her car was found parked outside, with her purse still inside, but there was no sign of Gretchen. It seemed as if she had disappeared without a trace. But then investigators found footage of David attempting to pawn what appeared to be her jewelry in Pensacola. This raised even more questions about his involvement. While David remained tight-lipped, other people close to Gretchen started coming forward. Tips were flooding in about the odd circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Some mentioned a possible high-profile case she had been working on, but it became clear that no one had any concrete evidence of it. What was clear, however, was that David's erratic behavior might have been more than just coincidence. Then came the pivotal moment, a text message from Gretchen to her ex-husband just days before she went missing. It was chilling, revealing the fear Gretchen had about David. She warned him, "Please do not take calls or allow David to see our daughter. He's in a state of mania. He just got out of jail, and I'm afraid he might try to see her before he leaves for Costa Rica." The text painted a vivid picture of a man spiraling out of control. David had a known history of bipolar disorder, but it seemed his behavior had taken a darker turn in recent years, especially after a traumatic accident. According to Gretchen's sister, David was never the same after a serious head injury from a car accident. If this injury did alter his mental state, it could explain some of his erratic behavior. As more and more details came to light, the authorities couldn't ignore the signs pointing to David. But still, the question remained, where was Gretchen? And what happened that morning she disappeared? The investigation was far from over, and the deeper they dug, the more the pieces of this chilling puzzle began to fall into place. As investigators continue to piece together the mystery of Gretchen's disappearance, the deeper they dig, the more they uncover about her troubled relationship with David. It becomes clear that David's past, filled with incidents involving the police, is not just a string of coincidences, but may offer key insights into what truly happened to Gretchen. David's troubling history with law enforcement starts to surface during his interrogation. In one of his more bizarre stories, David recalls an incident where he was detained after what he described as a spiritual experience during a wellness seminar. According to him, he was simply misunderstood, but the police saw it differently. Authorities detained him under Florida's Baker Act, a law that allows for involuntary mental health evaluations. It seemed like a minor misunderstanding at first, but it hinted at David's increasing instability. Just 3 weeks later, another strange incident occurred when David was detained again. This time, it was because he was allegedly found sleeping in his car outside a 7-Eleven. The police report described how David's dog, left in the hot car, led officers to question his judgment and behavior. Despite claiming he was simply worried about his dog, David's odd actions, like trying to escape from the car and resisting arrest, raised more concerns. In a moment of panic, he even tried to make bizarre accusations about the officers, claiming they would use Photoshop to make their bruises look worse. His stories didn't line up, and the situation escalated into a physical confrontation, with David eventually being arrested for resisting arrest without violence. However, this charge was later reduced. As police continue their investigation, they reach out to David's family for more context. When they visit his mother's home, she admits that David has been struggling lately. She insists, however, that he has never hurt anyone, though his behavior has been erratic and his temper unpredictable. David's wife Gretchen had been trying to help him, but it seemed like the weight of his issues was too much for her to bear. Friends and family reveal that Gretchen had been the primary provider in their relationship, supporting David financially while he dealt with his mental health struggles and frequent lapses in employment. But even with her support, it's clear that David's behavior had grown more disturbing over time. Then, the investigation takes a chilling turn. It's revealed that Gretchen had installed several Blink security cameras around her house, and the footage they capture on the morning of the 21st of March, the last day Gretchen was seen alive, sends a cold chill down the spine of every investigator. These cameras reveal the final moments at Gretchen's home, offering an eerie glimpse into the hours leading up to her disappearance. The footage, along with all the mounting evidence, confirms the authorities' worst fears. Something terrible had happened to Gretchen, and David may have played a far more sinister role than anyone could have anticipated. As the investigation unfolds, one thing becomes clear: David's past, combined with the evidence being uncovered, is painting a very dark picture of what might have happened to Gretchen. And, with the chilling security footage in hand, authorities are now closer than ever to revealing the truth. But the question remains: what truly happened on that fateful day? And what secrets lie hidden in Gretchen's home, waiting to be uncovered? The mystery surrounding Gretchen's disappearance grows darker with each passing hour, and investigators are getting closer to the truth. A chilling revelation begins with security footage from Gretchen's home, a moment that would change everything. The footage shows David outside her house in the early hours, sneaking around her back patio. In the pre-dawn darkness, it seems like he's trying to remain unnoticed until a light turns on inside the house. Someone inside may have seen him. The game of cat and mouse between David and Gretchen now unfolds before investigators, and they're just beginning to piece together the horror that took place in the hours leading up to her disappearance. Detectives, now in possession of the video, confront David with the evidence. They know more than he thinks. As the detective presents him with footage of his movements on Gretchen's back patio, David's nerve starts to crack. The police are well aware that Blink, Gretchen's security system, operates on cloud storage, meaning the footage cannot just be erased. No matter what David tries to destroy, the truth is already stored elsewhere, and he can't escape it. David, though, insists that he doesn't understand. He tries to deny any connection to the footage, but the detective presses on. "You were here, David," the detective says firmly. "This camera caught not only you, but a very disturbing interaction between you and Gretchen. At 6:13 a.m., we hear muffled yells, and we see Gretchen being moved toward the garage. What was going on in that moment?" David's face tightens as he listens. It's clear from his body language he's now trying to keep his cool, but he knows that the evidence is piling up against him. The detective doesn't back down, explaining again that no amount of manipulation or denial is going to change the facts. These cameras didn't just disappear, they were uploaded to the cloud. You can't lie your way out of this. Still, David holds to his story. But as the footage from Gretchen's house continues to unfold, the evidence against David becomes more damning. There's more footage of David pacing in the garage, wearing green gloves similar to those found in his truck. He's loading Gretchen's Mini Cooper and carrying a red-stained rag. The implications are horrifying, but the footage doesn't stop there. David, realizing he's being watched, takes action, destroying the cameras in a last-ditch effort to cover his tracks. But it's too late. Everything is already captured. And if that wasn't enough, surveillance footage from outside a hospital paints an even clearer picture. The Mini Cooper, now placed in a parking lot, wasn't driven there by Gretchen. It was planted there by none other than David himself. He's trying to cover his tracks, but the authorities are too far ahead of him now. "That's you in her car," the detective tells him. "You're cleaning up in the garage after something went terribly wrong." David remains defiant. but it's clear that the walls are closing in around him. The detective's tone grows more intense as he presses David on the next piece of evidence. Do you know what this is, David? A small photo of Gretchen appears on the screen, and David's face betrays a moment of hesitation. The detective doesn't let up. This is Gretchen, and this is her last known interaction with you. What happened to her? David's defense starts to crumble as the detectives continue to drop bombshell after bombshell, with more damning evidence emerging from every angle. As they push him to confess, the focus shifts from the technicalities of his lies to the emotional damage he's caused. The detective, now growing visibly frustrated, tries a new tactic, appealing to David's conscience, or what's left of it. Look at her, the detective says, pointing to a picture of Gretchen's daughter, Ava. Look at what this little girl is going through. She's lost her mom, and she has no idea where she is. You're the only one who knows. You owe her the truth. Tell us where her mother is. David's face hardens. He knows he's been caught, but he refuses to give in. I wouldn't hurt her. David insists, but his words ring hollow. He knows deep down that this isn't just about Gretchen anymore, it's about the child who's left behind. The child who is now forced to live with the consequences of his actions, even if he won't admit them. As the detectives push harder, they reveal more details about Gretchen's last moments, piecing together how David's car was seen on Florida's SunPass CameraSan electronic toll system that tracked David's movements. Gretchen's Mini Cooper, however, wasn't with him. There was no sign of her on the footage. But David's story doesn't add up. You know what happened, the detective says coldly. We have all the footage. We know you planted her car at Jupiter Medical Center. We have you on camera. We've got her phone. We've got the text messages. You can't keep lying. You're the one who put your hands over her mouth, dragged her into the garage, and now you're covering it up. David's silence speaks volumes. He may be trying to save himself, but the evidence is undeniable. The detectives know Gretchen is dead, and they're determined to find her no matter what. With more pressure mounting, the question is no longer what happened, it's where is Gretchen's body? And will David finally break and reveal the truth? The investigation into Gretchen's disappearance is taking a chilling turn, and now David, the one person who holds the key to the mystery, is cornered by undeniable evidence. The detectives, who have been painstakingly piecing together the case, aren't giving up. They're about to push David to his breaking point. David, listen to me carefully, the detective says, his voice calm yet full of purpose. We know what happened. We know what you did. You dragged her into that garage. You put your hand over her mouth, and then you tried to clean up the mess you made. The blood loss, the cleanup, the garage, everything points to one thing. She's gone and you killed her. David shakes his head, his demeanor shifting. He wants to deny it, to hold on to his lies, but the walls are closing in. The detectives know the truth, and it's only a matter of time before David's story unravels completely. The cadaver dog that sniffed out the groggy dog, trained to detect the scent of human remains laid down in a specific spot, confirming what they already knew. Gretchen's blood was found, and her lifeless body wasn't just a theory, it was fact. But David isn't ready to face it. No, David mutters. She's alive. She's out there. His voice is desperate now, as if he's trying to convince himself more than anyone else. The detective cuts him off. We have photos, David. We have video footage. We know you dragged her into that garage. The evidence doesn't lie. And now, it's time to face the truth. But David isn't ready to break. Instead, he clings to his version of events, trying to explain away the evidence. He tells the detectives about Gretchen's supposed medical issues, claiming she didn't trust conventional doctors and that she sought alternative treatments. But none of this explains the blood spattered in her garage or the damning footage that shows him dragging her into that very space. You're not listening, the detective says firmly, stepping closer. She didn't go to any hospital. We've checked. There's no record of her anywhere. And you know what else we've got? The blink footage. We've seen it, David. We saw you put your hands over her mouth and drag her. We saw you. It's all there. David's face tightens. I didn't see any video. You're lying. He's grasping at straws now, refusing to accept what's in front of him. The detectives exchange glances, knowing they need to push harder. Okay, David. You want proof? Fine, the detective says, motioning for his partner to step out of the room. The tension in the air is palpable, and David's nerves are starting to show. His bravado is cracking. When the detective returns, he's holding something recording. The room goes quiet as he presses play. It's a little girl's voice pleading, filled with sorrow and desperation. "David, I love you. I'm scared. I miss my mom. I need to know where my mom is. Please, do the right thing and tell us where she is. I love you." The sound of a young child crying, asking for answers David refuses to give is enough to shake him. This isn't just about Gretchen anymore. It's about Ava, her daughter. And that's what the detectives are counting on. The detective's voice softens. "David, do the right thing. Tell us where her mother is. You know in your heart what you've done. Don't make her grow up with this. You've got one last chance to do something good, to give her some closure. Do it for her." But David remains stone-faced, refusing to show any emotion. "I'm not saying anything," he mutters, as if trying to retreat further into his lies. "I've done nothing wrong." The detectives don't flinch. They know this is a last-ditch effort to save himself. But David's denials are growing weaker, and the mounting evidence is undeniable. The blood, the footage, the phone calls, it all leads to one conclusion. Gretchen is gone, and David is the one who ended her life. As the hours pass, the detectives continue their push, trying to break through David's walls. The blood, the photographs, the cadaver dog, the video footage, each piece of evidence is a reminder of the tragedy that unfolded in that garage. But David's silence speaks volumes. He knows the game is over, but he won't admit it. Not yet. The detectives have one final tactic. They've painted the picture of what happened. They've shown David the consequences of his actions. But in the end, it's Ava, the innocent child who has lost her mother, who will drive the final nail into David's coffin. The detectives hope that, for her sake, David will finally do the right thing. Will he? Or will his pride and guilt hold him silent forever? Time will tell. But the truth is, Gretchen is dead, and David is the one responsible. The only question left is whether he will ever reveal the final piece of the puzzle. Where is her body? And how will he answer for the monstrous act he committed? This story, one of chilling betrayal and a gruesome crime, is about to take a new twist. David Anthony, once a man in denial, now finds himself cornered by the law, with every piece of evidence pointing directly to him. Let's rewind, shall we? David's path to justice isn't going to be an easy one. The detectives have done their homework. They've gone through the footage, the testimonies, the physical evidence, everything. They know Gretchen didn't just vanish into thin air. She's dead. But David isn't giving up his story that she's still out there. So when the detectives confront him again, trying to reach the part of him that still feels human, trying to play on his sense of morality, they hope for a crack in his cold exterior. "How would you feel if you told me where she was?" the detective asks, trying to dig deep into David's psyche. "How do you think it would feel to finally tell us where Gretchen is?" David scoffs, dismissing the question like it's a joke. "It doesn't matter, man," he retorts. "You think I care about your interpretation?" He's still holding on to the lie. He's trying to dodge the reality of his actions, refusing to face the truth. He's not ready to let go of his narrative, no matter how deep the detectives dig. But the detective isn't finished. There's something that could break him the real punch to his conscience. The detective brings up something powerful, something personal. What about that little girl's recording? Remember how she feels, David. Remember how she's hurting. Take that with you. That hits David harder than any police report could. It's one last attempt to push him toward the truth. But David doesn't budge. He sits there, silent, refusing to acknowledge his part in Gretchen's death. He's digging in his heels, pretending that the walls aren't closing in on him. He's clinging to the lies, even when it's clear he's been caught. Now, the detectives have one final card to play. What they didn't tell David was that they had something even more damning. They had Gretchen's voice. In her final moments, just before she disappeared, she had recorded a message. It was captured by the Alexa device in her home on the very morning that David was sneaking around her back patio. The recording reveals her panic as she discovered David's presence. It's a heartbreaking moment, and it's the final nail in David's coffin. Despite this, David remains defiant. But the pressure's too much, and soon after, David is arrested and charged with second-degree murder and kidnapping. The game is over. He pled guilty as part of a deal, but his cooperation was hard-earned. The plea deal required him to take the authorities to Gretchen's remains, which had been buried in a shallow grave behind a Walmart just a few miles from her home. The The discovery comes after a tip from a local man who had been noticing a strange smell in the area. "A horrible, rotting smell," he said, describing what led authorities to the gruesome location where Gretchen's body had been concealed. It's eerie how close this tip was to where David had hidden her body. The details of her death are just as chilling. Multiple stab wounds to her torso and neck. The method was brutal, the betrayal deep. David's actions don't just end with her murder. His refusal to reveal where she was left her family and, especially her daughter, a vein in the dark, with no closure. David, now behind bars, is facing a harsh sentence, 38 years in prison. But even in his confinement, he's still trying to make excuses. In a recorded jail call to his brother, David says something chilling, as if he's trying to absolve himself of any responsibility. "I know there's some bad stuff, but there's a ton of good stuff, man. I didn't do anything to you. I had to do it, not because I wanted to." That last statement, it's the ultimate attempt at justifying his actions. A selfish man trying to reconcile his horrific crime with the life he used to know. But it's too late. The truth is out. Gretchen is gone, and David will pay for the suffering he caused, one way or another. If you found this story compelling and chilling, don't forget to share it with others who might be interested. Your support means the world to us. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more true crime stories like this one. Thank you so much for watching, and we appreciate you being part of our community.